According to Richard Allington, if we don't read, how are we going to get good? The best way to become readers is by reading and reading a lot. In the field of teaching, this is called independent reading. I agree with this idea and philosophy, so I push my own students to read and to read often. I have no control over what students do when they leave my classroom, but I have a great deal of influence in my classroom. Students will not assimilate a lifelong love of reading if they are forced to read. In order for this to happen, they need to choose to read and develop the habit of reading. I think the best way to bring this about is to create the conditions which are necessary for fostering a love of reading and learning. We as educators know there's more to it than that. This is when differentiated instruction will become necessary. Some students will enter your classroom as readers and some will not be readers. In addition, each of these readers and non-readers will have varied reading levels, skills, abilities, and attitudes. I kind of like how Donalyn Miller, the author of The Book Whisperer, classifies the types of readers that she sees in her classroom. She calls them either developing readers, dormant readers, or underground readers. I have had all these types of readers in my classrooms. This past year, I had at least half a dozen students that I would classify as developing readers because they came into my classroom reading at a pre-primary level. I also had a dozen grade level readers. These were either dormant or underground readers, depending on their attitude toward reading and what motivated them to read. The rest of my students were above grade level. Most of them were underground readers because they could and would read mandatory text, but were more interested in reading their own stuff. Of course, if you would prefer to classify your readers in a more scientific way, go ahead and get out your qualitative reading inventory or your Fontes and Pinnell and have at it. Hopefully, you have a few aides in your classroom that can monitor behavior while you focus entirely on the one student you are assessing. If you do not have a team of aides to assess your students for you, then you need to find a way to motivate your students to do literacy activities independently. We all have these types of students in our classroom. Even when I was a student myself, these were the kinds of students in my classes. The difference is how I was taught compared to how I teach now. I remember all those book reports and whole class novels, the endless worksheets, the lengthy lectures. I was fortunate enough to be an above grade level reader, and I did what my teachers told me to do. I was an underground reader. I preferred to read what I liked, but I discovered that in the school library, the best books to do reports on were very thin and easy to read. In 5th grade, I submitted book reports on any number of famous people. You know, the genre, biographies. These were written for 3rd graders and generally less than 50 pages. When I read at home, it was stories such as The Lord of the Rings and A Wrinkle in Time that captivated my mind and interest. Back in those days, teachers were likely to do what Donalyn Miller calls the spray and pray method of teaching. The results are clearly represented in the bell curve, which we can see in all the historical data. Those who can, do, and those who could not were retained or sent to do classes somewhere else. I do not get the luxury of sending all my below grade level readers away. I am a public education teacher, and since immersion was adopted, I get all of them. I do not get to send my least capable to special education classrooms, or my most talented to a gifted and talented classroom. Nowadays, the expectations have been raised so that 80% or more of our students are expected to achieve at or above grade level. In order to make this happen, teachers need to adopt a new paradigm and transform our classrooms into workshops rather than lecture halls. The reality is that our classrooms are suffering from what some refer to as the Matthew effect, Matthew 13:12, a verse in the Bible which talks about how the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Some readers are able to get through school and have rich vocabulary and deep knowledge of the world, but many students have a major deficit in vocabulary and very little knowledge. This harkens back to the research Richard Allington did back in What Really Matters for Struggling Readers, where he found that students who were receiving reading intervention from Title I and special education programs were reading about 75% less than the students in regular education classrooms.